My former wife tried to steal $400,000 that I had saved for my children. She also demanded that I pay for her new husband's children as well. 13 years ago, Amanda and I ended our marriage. It wasn't a sudden decision. We'd been growing apart for years. Sarah was just 3, and Eric wasn't even 1. Despite how messy things had gotten between us, we agreed on one thing. We both loved our kids. We decided on a 50-50 custody arrangement, equal time, equal responsibilities. No alimony, just splitting expenses down the middle. On paper, it sounded like a clean, fair setup. Reality, though, has been anything but smooth. At the start, it was all about finding balance. Amanda and I both wanted to be there for the kids, but even the simplest agreements seemed to come with a side of tension. For example, every conversation about money turned into an argument. It didn't matter if it was about soccer uniforms, piano lessons, or a surprise school trip. Amanda always had a way of making me feel like I wasn't pulling my weight, even when I was the one covering more than half. She had this frustrating habit of changing plans at the last minute, too. Take Sarah's first grade recital, for example. I'd cleared my schedule weeks in advance to be there. The night before, Amanda called and said she'd promised Sarah she'd take her for ice cream right after the recital. "It's our little tradition," she said, even though this so-called tradition had never come up before. I ended up missing out on time with Sarah because Amanda decided to rewrite the plan. Then there were the lies. Amanda's relationship with the truth has always been flexible. At first, it was little things, like claiming she didn't get my emails about doctor's appointments or forgetting to tell me about parent-teacher meetings. But it escalated. One year, Sarah needed braces, and Amanda conveniently forgot to show me the orthodontist bill until months later. She'd already paid it, on her credit card, and wanted me to reimburse half. When I asked for a breakdown of the costs, she got defensive, accusing me of not trusting her. The kicker? I called the orthodontist's office to clarify the total and found out Amanda had added extra services we'd never agreed on. "Oh, it was for Sarah's comfort," she said when I confronted her. "Don't you care about your daughter's well-being?" It was hard to argue with her without feeling like the bad guy, even though I knew she was manipulating the situation. Co-parenting also meant navigating holidays, which quickly became a battleground. Amanda insisted on having the kids for every Christmas morning, claiming it was better for their stability. I didn't want to disrupt their routine, so I gave in for a few years. But one year, Sarah came back from Amanda's house crying, saying she felt bad that I'd spent Christmas alone. It broke my heart. After that, I fought for alternating holidays, and Amanda acted like I was trying to ruin her life. She told the kids I was being selfish, which led to weeks of tension between me and them. School events were another minefield. Amanda liked to play the fun mom, showing up late but bringing extravagant treats or gifts for the kids. Meanwhile, I was the one emailing teachers, helping with homework, and making sure Sarah and Eric were on top of their responsibilities. Once, during a parent-teacher conference, Amanda casually mentioned that she was thinking of switching Eric to a different school, without consulting me. The teacher looked at me like, "You had no idea?" I didn't. That was Amanda in a nutshell, making big decisions unilaterally, then acting like I was the unreasonable one for being upset. The hardest part has been watching how all this affects Sarah and Eric. They've grown up in the middle of our tug-of-war, and I hate that for them. Sarah, especially, has started picking up on Amanda's manipulative tendencies. A few months ago, she asked me for extra spending money because Mom said you're supposed to give me $50 a week. When I told her that wasn't true, she got upset, saying I didn't care about her the way Amanda did. It hurt, but I knew exactly where she got that idea. Eric, on the other hand, is quieter about it all. He's a sensitive kid, and I can tell he struggles with the tension between Amanda and me. Once, when I asked him how his weekend was, he just shrugged and said, "It was fine, I guess." Later, I found out Amanda had taken him to a theme park without telling me. She told him not to mention it because your dad might get jealous. That kind of thing drives me insane. Despite all this, I've tried to keep things civil. I want my kids to feel like they have two loving parents, even if we're no longer together. But Amanda makes that incredibly difficult. Every time I think we've found some sort of equilibrium, she throws a curveball. A few years ago, she started dating someone new, Mark. He seemed nice enough at first, But then he started inserting himself into decisions about Sarah and Eric. Amanda encouraged it, saying, "Mark's going to be part of their lives, so he should have a say." I disagreed, and Amanda called me controlling. Mark and I had a heated exchange when he tried to dictate where Sarah should go to summer camp. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that he wasn't their parent. Amanda, of course, took his side, accusing me of being territorial. It's like every step forward with her comes with 2 steps back. 13 years later, I'm still walking this tightrope. Sarah and Eric are amazing kids, and I'm so proud of the people they're becoming. But co-parenting with Amanda has been one of the most exhausting challenges of my life. Some days, I feel like I'm barely holding it together. I've considered going back to court to renegotiate the custody agreement, but I worry about putting the kids through that. I just wish Amanda could see that this isn't about her or me. It's about Sarah and Eric. They deserve better than the constant push and pull. If anyone has advice, I'm all ears. When Sarah was born, something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a responsibility bigger than myself. When Eric followed 2 years later, that feeling doubled. From the moment they came into this world, I wanted to ensure their future was secure, no matter what. That's why I set up special accounts for both of them shortly after their births. It all started with a workers' compensation settlement. Back in my late 20s, I was involved in a serious accident at my construction job. A collapsing scaffold nearly ended my career. And, honestly, it's a miracle I wasn't paralyzed. The case dragged on for nearly 2 years, but when it finally settled, I received $150,000. At the time, I could have used the money to pay off debts or even buy a house, but all I could think about was Sarah's future. I set aside the entire amount, creating an account that would be exclusively hers when she turned 18. When Eric was born, I did the same thing for him. I didn't know how I'd match the amount, but I promised myself I'd figure it out. Then, a few years later, fate threw me another curveball. A distant relative, an uncle I'd only met twice, passed away and left me $200,000. I was stunned. I hadn't even known I was in his will. After the initial shock wore off, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I split the inheritance between Sarah and Eric's accounts, making sure they'd both have something significant to start their adult lives with. At first, Amanda supported the idea. "It's great you're thinking about their future," she said, flashing one of her practice smiles. But over the years, her attitude toward those accounts has shifted dramatically. About 6 years ago, Amanda called me out of the blue, asking if we could borrow some of the kids' money to cover a shortfall on her mortgage. She'd bought a larger house after the divorce, one I knew she couldn't afford, and now she was struggling to keep up with the payments. I was floored. "That money is for Sarah and Eric," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's not ours to touch." Amanda didn't see it that way. She accused me of being selfish, of not caring about her or the kids' stability. "If I lose this house, it'll be your fault," she spat before hanging up. That incident was just the beginning. Amanda brought up the accounts at least once a year, always under the guise of helping the kids. When Sarah wanted to attend a pricey summer camp, Amanda suggested we dip into her fund. "It's her money, Joshua," she argued. "Why not let her enjoy it?" I stood firm, explaining that the accounts were meant for college or something equally important, not temporary luxuries. Amanda rolled her eyes, muttering something about how I always had to play the responsible one. Things escalated last year when Amanda found herself in legal trouble. She'd been dating a man named Brad, a slick-talking real estate investor who turned out to be a scam artist. Long story short, Amanda had co-signed on one of his shady deals and ended up facing a lawsuit when the whole thing collapsed. She came to me in tears, begging for help. "The kids will be affected if I go bankrupt," she said, her voice trembling. "Can't we use some of the money to make this go away?" It was hard to say no. Part of me wanted to help for the kids' sake, but I couldn't justify draining their future savings to clean up Amanda's mess. When I refused, Amanda exploded. "You're just trying to make me look like the bad guy," she yelled, slamming the door on her way out. What Amanda didn't realize, or maybe didn't care about, was that the accounts weren't just sitting in some savings account earning next to nothing. I'd spent years carefully investing the funds in low-risk portfolios, making sure they grew steadily. By the time Sarah turned 18, Her account would likely be worth over $200,000, and Eric's would be close behind. I wasn't about to let anyone, not even their mother, jeopardize that. But Amanda wasn't done. A few months ago, I noticed something odd in Eric's behavior. He started dropping hints about wanting a car. Nothing extravagant, just something he could use to get to school and back. I wasn't opposed to the idea, but I knew Amanda had been planting the seed. Sure enough, Eric eventually admitted that Amanda had told him about his money. "Mom says I should be able to use it for whatever I want," he said, looking at me expectantly. I had to sit him down and explain the situation. "That money isn't for things like cars," I told him. "It's for college, or starting your own business, or buying a house someday." Eric seemed to understand, but I could tell he was disappointed. Amanda, however, was livid. She accused me of brainwashing the kids and trying to control their lives. "You're making them think I'm the enemy," she said during one particularly heated argument. "All I want is for them to be happy." As if all this wasn't enough, Amanda's sister, Laura, decided to weigh in. Laura and I have always had a rocky relationship. She's like a carbon copy of Amanda, but somehow even more combative. At a family gathering last month, she cornered me in the kitchen and started lecturing me about the accounts. "You're just trying to buy their love," she sneered. "Money isn't going to make up for all the ways you've failed as a father." I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene, but her words stuck with me. Amanda must have been feeding her a very skewed version of events, because nothing about my relationship with Sarah and Eric felt like a failure. If anything, I'd sacrificed more than I ever thought possible to make sure they had a stable, loving environment. Despite all the drama, I've held my ground. The accounts are still intact, and I've made it clear to Amanda and anyone else who will listen that they aren't up for debate. But the pressure is constant. Amanda's latest tactic is to play the victim, telling anyone who will listen that I'm hoarding money that could make the kids' lives better right now. It's exhausting. Still, when I think about the future, I know I'm doing the right thing. One day, Sarah and Eric will understand why I fought so hard to protect their savings. Until then, I just have to keep weathering the storm. If anyone's been through something similar, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Amanda remarried about 6 years ago, and her new husband, Richard, came with a lot of baggage. He has a teenage daughter, Chloe, from a previous marriage and a nephew, Kyle, who lives with them. On top of that, Amanda and Richard have 2 children together, Emma, who's 5, and Jake, who's 3. That's 6 people crammed into one house, and the financial strain is starting to show. At first, I kept my distance from Amanda's new family dynamic. I figured it wasn't my business as long as it didn't affect Sarah and Eric. But over the years, it's become impossible to ignore how their money problems are trickling into my life. It started small. Amanda would make comments about how tight things are during our exchanges about the kids. I'd drop Eric off after a weekend at my place, and Amanda would be at the door with a strained smile, her eyes darting toward Richard, who always seemed to be glued to the couch. He's the type of guy who looks busy but never actually does much. From what I've gathered, his business ventures are mostly failed startups and half-baked investment schemes. About 2 years ago, Amanda started hinting that I should help out more. She brought it up casually at first, saying things like, "It's expensive raising teenagers these days," or "Richard and I are doing our best, but it's hard with 4 kids and Kyle." I brushed it off, reminding her that we had an agreement to split expenses for Sarah and Eric 50/50ths. She didn't press the issue, but I could tell it wasn't the end of it. Then came the bigger asks. Amanda called me one evening, her voice dripping with desperation. "Josh, I hate to ask, but could you cover Sarah's dance lessons this semester? We're just swamped right now with some unexpected bills." When I asked what kind of bills, she gave a vague answer about car repairs and medical expenses for one of her younger kids. Against my better judgment, I agreed to pay for the lessons, thinking it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. A few weeks later, Amanda asked if I could help with Eric's soccer gear. Then it was Sarah's SAT prep course. Each time, she framed it as being just this once, but the requests kept coming. I finally put my foot down, reminding her that I was already contributing to the kids' future in a significant way with the accounts I'd set up. Amanda didn't take it well. "Those accounts don't help us now," she snapped. You're sitting on all this money while we're drowning." Around the same time, Sarah started coming home with complaints about how things were at Amanda's house. "Mom and Richard fight all the time," she confided one night. "He's always yelling about money." Eric echoed her concerns, telling me he often heard Amanda and Richard arguing late at night. Apparently, Richard wasn't thrilled about the fact that Amanda's financial troubles predated their marriage, and he resented having to support Sarah and Eric. It was clear their home life was chaotic. Chloe, Richard's teenage daughter, added her own layer of tension. Sarah said Chloe was bossy and acted like she was in charge of the house, often bullying Sarah and Eric into giving up their turn on the TV or taking over their shared bathroom. Kyle, Richard's nephew, was another wild card. He'd been sent to live with Richard after his own parents got into legal trouble, and from what I heard, he had a knack for stirring up drama. One of the most shocking moments came last year when Sarah called me in tears from Amanda's house. Apparently, Amanda had pawned Sarah's laptop to cover a utility bill. Sarah had been using the laptop for schoolwork, and when she couldn't find it, Amanda admitted what she'd done. "It's not a big deal," Amanda told her. "We'll get it back when things settle down." Sarah was devastated, and when I confronted Amanda, she doubled down. "You don't understand what it's like, Josh," she said. "I did what I had to do. I ended up buying Sarah a replacement laptop, but the incident left a bad taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about the money. It was the principle. Amanda's poor financial decisions were directly impacting the kids, and I couldn't stand by and let it continue." Meanwhile, Richard's ventures were becoming more erratic. He tried everything from flipping houses to selling essential oils online, and none of it stuck. Amanda told me he was working on a big project that would change everything, but it never materialized. Instead, their debt kept piling up. Amanda confided in me during one of her rare moments of honesty, admitting that they were months behind on their mortgage and struggling to keep the lights on. "We're just waiting for Richard's deal to come through," she said, as if that was some kind of solution. Things came to a head a few months ago when Amanda asked if I would lend them money from Sarah and Eric's accounts. "It's just until we can get back on our feet," she said, her voice trembling. "We'd pay it back as soon as possible." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Absolutely not," I told her. "That money is for the kids' future, not to bail you out." Amanda didn't take it well. She accused me of being heartless, of caring more about money than my own children. "Do you know what it's like to live like this?" she screamed during one of our exchanges. "To worry every day about whether you'll have enough to feed your kids?" Sarah and Eric have been caught in the middle of all this chaos. Eric, who's always been quiet and introspective, has started withdrawing even more. He spends most of his time in his room when he's at Amanda's house, trying to avoid the drama. Sarah, on the other hand, has become more vocal. She started standing up to Amanda and Richard, which has led to more arguments. "I hate it here," she told me recently. "I wish I could just live with you full time. It's heartbreaking to see my kids going through this, especially when I've done everything I can to give them a stable future." The accounts I set up now total about $400,000, enough to cover tuition at a prestigious university or even help them buy their first homes. But Amanda's constant pressure to dip into those funds has made me question how long I can keep them protected. Last week, Amanda dropped another bombshell. She and Richard are considering selling their house and moving in with Richard's mother to save money. "It's just temporary," she said, as if that made it any less of a disruption. Sarah and Eric are furious at the idea, and I can't blame them. The thought of them being crammed into a small house with even less privacy is unbearable. I'm at a loss for what to do. On one hand, I want to shield Sarah and Eric from Amanda's financial mess. On the other, I don't want to escalate things by going back to court. If anyone has been in a similar situation, I could really use some advice. When Amanda and Richard sat me down to talk about a pressing financial matter, I knew it wasn't going to be good. Amanda had that look she always gets when she's about to manipulate a situation, half desperate, half determined, and Richard was doing his usual act of pretending to be in charge, though he couldn't even manage his own finances. "We need to discuss something that's becoming a real issue for our family," Amanda started. She glanced at Richard for support, but he just nodded silently, letting her do all the talking. "We think it's time you start paying child support." I nearly laughed. "Child support? We split everything evenly. I've been covering my half without fail for 13 years. Amanda shifted in her seat, trying to appear calm. Yes, but things have changed. Raising kids is more expensive now, and Richard and I are struggling. You know that. Richard finally chimed in. It's about fairness. You're in a better financial position than we are, and the kids are part of a bigger family now. Everyone should have the same opportunities. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My financial responsibility is to Sarah and Eric. You know that. The fact that you've taken on more people in your household is not my problem. The conversation didn't stop there. Amanda, emboldened by Richard's presence, brought up the savings accounts I'd set up for Sarah and Eric. Those accounts are a great resource, she said, her tone casual as if she wasn't about to propose something outrageous. We were thinking it would be nice if some of that money could be shared with Chloe, Kyle, Emma, and Jake. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Then I exploded. Absolutely not. That money is for Sarah and Eric's future. I'm not going to jeopardize their opportunities to bail you out. Amanda's face hardened. You're being selfish, Joshua. These are their siblings. They deserve a chance too. Deserve a chance? I shot back. They're not my children. My priority is making sure Sarah and Eric have everything they need. If you and Richard can't handle your financial situation, that's on you. Richard didn't take my response well. This isn't just about you anymore, he said, his voice rising. We're a family now, and family means helping each other out. Then maybe you should start by actually supporting your family instead of coming to me for handouts, I said, not bothering to mask my frustration. I'm already doing more than enough for my kids. I'm not going to carry your household on top of that. The conversation ended with Amanda storming out of the room and Richard muttering something under his breath about me being impossible to deal with. I thought that was the end of it, but Amanda wasn't done. A week later, she started calling me repeatedly, leaving voicemails about how I was ruining the kids' sense of unity by refusing to contribute. She even tried to use Sarah and Eric against me, telling them that I was being unfair to their siblings. Mom says you don't care about Emma and Jake, Eric said one evening, his voice hesitant. She said you're trying to punish her. It took everything in me not to lose my temper. That's not true, Eric, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about making sure you and Sarah have what you need for your future. That's my job as your dad. Sarah, always more perceptive, saw through Amanda's manipulation. Mom's just mad because you won't give her what she wants, she said bluntly. It's not fair that she's dragging us into this. The pressure didn't stop with Amanda and Richard. Laura, Amanda's sister, decided to weigh in, as she always does when there's drama. She cornered me at one of Sarah's soccer games, her tone dripping with condescension. You know, Joshua, it wouldn't kill you to help out a little more, she said. Amanda's doing her best, but she's drowning over there. And let's be honest, you've always been a little tight with money. Tight with money? I said, my voice rising. I've contributed to every single expense for my kids without fail. Meanwhile, Amanda and Richard are living way beyond their means and expecting me to pick up the slack. Laura shrugged, clearly enjoying the argument. All I'm saying is that you could show a little compassion. They're your kids' siblings, after all. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. As if the situation couldn't get worse, Richard started showing up to Sarah and Eric's events, acting like he was some kind of mediator. At one of Eric's basketball games, he pulled me aside during halftime. Look, man, he said, putting on his best, reasonable voice. I know you're upset, but we're all just trying to do what's best for the kids. This isn't about us. It's about making sure they all have a fair shot. I stared at him, barely able to contain my anger. If this is about fairness, maybe you should focus on fixing your own financial mess instead of trying to raid my kids' savings. Richard's face flushed red. You're being unreasonable, he said, his voice rising. We're supposed to be working together. We are working together, I snapped. I'm supporting my kids, just like I always have. But I'm not going to let you or Amanda guilt me into giving up what I've built for them. The final straw came when Amanda threatened to take me to court. If you won't pay child support, I'll make sure the court forces you to, she said during one particularly heated argument. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. Go ahead, I said, refusing to back down. Take me to court. Let's see how well that works out for you when the judge sees that I've been covering my share, and then some. Amanda didn't follow through on her threat. At least, not yet. But the tension between us has reached an all-time high. Every interaction feels like a battle, and I'm constantly on edge, waiting for the next attack. It started subtly, as most of Amanda's manipulations do. Sarah came back from a weekend at her mother's house looking unusually quiet. Normally, she'd be excited to share updates about her latest soccer game or a funny story about her friends. But this time, she seemed preoccupied. When I asked if everything was okay, she shrugged and muttered, "Yeah, I guess." That was my first red flag. A few days later, during dinner, Sarah finally opened up. "Mom said it's not fair that Eric and I have all this money for college while Emma and Jake don't," she said, avoiding my gaze. "She thinks we should share." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Did she say that to you directly?" Sarah nodded. "She said we're all family now and that families are supposed to take care of each other. She even asked if I'd thought about how Emma and Jake would feel when they found out about our accounts." I was furious, but I didn't want to show it. The last thing Sarah needed was more tension. "Sarah," I said carefully, "that money is for you and Eric. It's not anyone else's business." "But it feels wrong," she said quietly. "Like, why do we get so much and they don't?" "Mom said they might not even be able to go to college." That was Amanda's plan in action, planting seeds of guilt and framing Sarah and Eric's savings as a moral dilemma instead of what it was, a resource I'd worked hard to secure for their future. I knew I needed to shut this down before it spiraled. The next weekend, I called Amanda to confront her. "We need to talk," I said. "What's this about you telling Sarah to share her savings with your other kids?" Amanda didn't even try to deny it. "I'm just trying to teach her empathy," she said, her tone defensive. "She needs to understand that life isn't just about her. Emma and Jake are her siblings. They deserve a shot, too. They're not her responsibility," I shot back. "And they're certainly not mine." "Stop putting that on her." Amanda sighed dramatically. "You're always so black and white, Josh. This isn't about taking money away from Sarah or Eric. It's about teaching them to be generous." "Generous?" I said, incredulous. "Generosity is a choice. What you're doing is manipulation." It wasn't just Amanda, though. Richard, always eager to play the victim, started chiming in during family events. One afternoon, when I dropped the kids off at Amanda's, Richard greeted me with his usual sarcastic tone. "Ah, the golden boy arrives," he said, gesturing toward Eric. "Must be nice having a dad who sets you up for life while the rest of us scrape by." Eric looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. I shot Richard a warning look. "Cut it out," I said firmly. "That's not appropriate." "Just stating the facts," Richard replied, throwing up his hands in mock surrender. Not all of us are so lucky. It wasn't the last time he made comments like that. During a dinner at Amanda's house, Sarah later told me, Richard had joked about how unfair it was that Sarah and Eric had college funds while his own kids would have to rely on scholarships or loans. "Must be nice to have rich daddy's safety net," he'd said, earning a laugh from Chloe and a pointed look from Amanda. Sarah hated it. "He's always making us feel like we're spoiled brats or something," she told me. "I don't even want to go over there anymore." Things escalated when Amanda started involving Emma and Jake directly. One evening, Sarah overheard Amanda telling Emma, "Maybe someday your sister will help you with college. She has so much, and she loves you." Sarah felt trapped. What was I supposed to say? She asked me later. If I said no, I'd look like a jerk. Eric, meanwhile, internalized the guilt. One night, I found him sitting alone in his room, staring at the floor. "Do you think it's wrong?" he asked quietly. "That we have so much and they don't?" "No," I said firmly. "It's not wrong. You didn't ask for this money, and it's not your fault they're struggling. Your mom and Richard's decisions are their own." "But it doesn't feel fair," Eric said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom said Chloe might not even go to college because they can't afford it." I felt a wave of frustration and sadness. Amanda's manipulation was working, and it was tearing my kids apart. The tipping point came during a family meeting Amanda insisted on having. "We need to come together as a family," she announced, sitting at the head of the table with Richard at her side. Sarah and Eric were visibly tense, while Chloe and Kyle sat smirking like they knew what was coming. Amanda launched into a speech about unity and fairness, reiterating her belief that Sarah and Eric's savings should be shared. "We're all one family now," she said, looking directly at Sarah. "It's not about taking anything away from you. It's about giving everyone a fair start." Richard chimed in. "Your dad has been generous with you, and that's great. But wouldn't it be even better if we could all benefit from that generosity?" I stood up, unable to listen to another word. "This meeting is over," I said. "Sarah and Eric don't owe you or anyone else their future. Stop trying to guilt them into giving up what's rightfully theirs." Amanda tried to protest, but I cut her off. "If you keep pressuring them like this, I'll make sure they don't have to come here anymore. This is emotional abuse, plain and simple." After that, things were tense. Sarah and Eric still had to spend time at Amanda's house, but they were wary of what they said or did around her and Richard. Sarah started keeping more to herself, and Eric became even quieter than usual. They were carrying a weight they shouldn't have had to bear, and I hated that Amanda had put them in this position. I've done everything I can to reassure them that they're not responsible for their mother's financial mess, but the damage has been done. Amanda's manipulation has created a rift that will take years to heal, if it ever does. All I can do now is keep fighting for my kids and hope they see through the lies. When I got the papers, I wasn't even surprised. After years of Amanda's manipulations, it was only a matter of time before she escalated things to the courtroom. Still, seeing her lawsuit laid out in black and white made my stomach churn. She claimed she was the primary caregiver for Sarah and Eric, demanded $3,000 a month in child support, and, unbelievably, requested financial support for her other children with Richard. The audacity left me speechless, but shock quickly gave way to determination. I wasn't going to let Amanda rewrite history or use our kids as leverage. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer, Martha Hensley, a no-nonsense family law attorney who came highly recommended. She didn't sugarcoat things. "This will get messy," she warned me during our first meeting. "But you have a solid case. If what you're telling me is accurate, there's no reason you should lose." Martha helped me gather all the documentation we'd need to fight Amanda's claims. I spent hours combing through old emails, receipts, and court documents from our original custody agreement. I wanted to ensure there were no gaps Amanda could exploit. I also compiled evidence of my contributions to Sarah and Eric's lives, records of shared expenses, proof of the savings accounts I'd built for them, and a detailed log of the time they spent with me. It was tedious work, but I knew it was necessary. Amanda, of course, tried to sway the kids before the trial even began. Sarah came home one weekend and said, "Mom keeps saying how hard this has been for her. She said the court will probably make you pay because it's not fair that she has to do everything." I had to tread carefully. "Sarah, you know that's not true," I said. "We've always split things equally. This isn't about what's fair. It's about what's right for you and Eric." Eric was quieter, but just as conflicted. "Mom said it might mean we don't get to do as much stuff if she loses," he admitted one night. "Is that true?" "No," I assured him. "Your mom's financial issues are separate from what happens in court. This is about making sure the agreement stays fair." When the trial started, Amanda came out swinging. She painted herself as a struggling single mother, claiming she'd borne the brunt of the caregiving responsibilities for years. Her lawyer emphasized the supposed financial disparity between us, arguing that I could easily afford to pay more to support the kids. Then came the kicker. Amanda's lawyer tried to argue that since Sarah and Eric were part of a blended family, I had a moral obligation to help support their siblings. "It's in the best interest of all the children," he said, with a straight face. Martha was ready. She calmly laid out the facts. Equal custody meant neither parent was the primary caregiver, and the expenses had always been split down the middle. She presented evidence of the savings accounts I'd built for Sarah and Eric, showing my long-term commitment to their futures. Finally, she addressed Amanda and Richard's financial woes head-on. "My client's financial stability has no bearing on the choices Ms. Amanda and Mr. Richard have made for their household," Martha said. "It is not Mr. Joshua's responsibility to subsidize those choices. The most satisfying moment came when Martha cross-examined Amanda. Under pressure, Amanda admitted that she and Richard had taken out multiple loans to cover their lifestyle, including a failed business venture of Richard's. She also conceded that she'd asked Sarah and Eric to consider sharing their savings with their siblings. It was a clear attempt to guilt-trip them, and the judge didn't look impressed. Richard was called to testify as well, and his arrogance worked against him. When asked why he thought I should pay for his children, he smirked and said, "It's only fair. He has the money, and we're family now." The judge's expression was priceless. "Fairness," she said, "is not the standard this court applies." After days of testimony and deliberation, the court ruled in my favor. The 50-50 custody agreement remained unchanged, and Amanda's claims for child support and financial assistance for her other children were dismissed outright. The relief was overwhelming, but more than that, I felt vindicated. For years, I'd been painted as the bad guy in Amanda's narrative, and now the truth was finally on record. After the trial, Amanda's demeanor changed. She stopped pushing for money and, for the most part, stopped making snide comments about my parenting. Richard, however, couldn't resist a few parting shots. "At one of Eric's basketball games," he muttered. "Must be nice to have the judge on your side." As I walked past him, I ignored him. I had no interest in engaging. Life after the trial settled into a new rhythm. Sarah, now 17, began actively planning for college. She's looking at several prestigious universities, and the savings I've protected for her will cover tuition without loans. She's excited about the future, and I couldn't be prouder. Eric, now 15, has thrown himself into his studies and sports. He's become a star player on his school's basketball team, and his coach thinks he has a real shot at playing in college. Watching him thrive despite all the drama has been a bright spot in this whole ordeal.